Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the First Tech Challenge, professional development for coaches and mentors. This session will be kind of a welcome and an introduction from GoBilda. We have Ethan Doak, who is will be presenting today. So without further ado, Ethan, go on ahead.
All right, that sounds great. So my name's Ethan. I am an FTC alumni, actually from Iowa. I was originally on team 4443, the Sock Monkeys from Oskaloosa over there. And I started here at GoBilda just over 2 years ago. I do have kind of two primary roles over there where I do a lot of our tech support. So chances are if you email or call up and ask for tech, you'll probably talk to me. And I also work in the research and development section. So working on new parts, and especially a big focus for me there is kits. So if you work with, some of our FTC kits or our Strafer kits, I probably had a pretty big role in that. So I don't have a super set presentation, but I'd like to kind of go over a few things focusing on the website and kind of a few resources that you can use and ways you can go about using GoBilda parts. So if you don't know about GoBilda, it is a building system from our company. Our larger company is called Robot Zone. We're also behind Servos City and Activotics. So this is kind of almost our second build system that we've gone ahead and created. And big difference between Activotics and GoBilda is GoBilda is going to be metric. And it was also something that we had a lot more of FTC in mind when we were going through and designing the initial components. So stuff like FTC legal motors are a really critical part of GoBilda, where Activotics, they're kind of more of an afterthought. They aren't really as critical to the system. So I'll go ahead and share my screen here. I think that should be working. And this is the GoBilda website. It is organized as basically you've got your overall categories and you've got stuff like featured parts and new parts. The thing I want to talk about first is going to be this FTC section up in the top left. It is where you find your 25% off discount form. Once you're an FTC team, you can apply with your team number and team name. And normally, like the next business day, we'll get back to you with an account that'll get you that 25% off. This is a big way we help teams and a big focus. We want to make sure everybody can know about that. That's a big thing for us. And the other thing is we've got college scholarships. Those are over for, this season. But for next season, I think we'll be probably opening, looks like in the spring. The other thing that we just released, just launched about last week, was our sponsorships. So our sponsorships kind of primarily focus on our chassis, our Strafer chassis, which I'll talk about a little bit more in depth in a little bit. But basically, we've got an application on this page, and at the end of every month for the next few months, we're going to be selecting 50 of those teams to be able to get a really, really deep discount on a Strafer as kind of a great startup. This is, we have a lot of teams who get this and decide to go through with it just for the parts. Like, it's a pretty good deal on just wheels and motors if you don't use anything else. So there's an application on this page that you can go through and apply for with your team. And if you're having something like an off-season event, if you have a, invitational, stuff like that, we also have event sponsorships where we'll oftentimes sponsor prizes. A big thing we've done recently is CAD challenges. If your team wants to host something like that, we do sponsor a lot of CAD challenges with prizes and stuff like that. So the other kind of section up here in the top left is the support section, and that's going to have all of our contact info. So sales, marketing, and tech are going to be the primary emails you can send to, and you can always give us a call. There's the number down here, and you can ask for any of those departments. You can ask for me specifically if you want, and we can definitely chat about FTC stuff. That's one of my favorite things to do. So this support section also highlights two of the things that I think make GoBilda really, really special, and the things that we work really hard on. I know back in the inception, there was a ton of time spent on the GoBilda pattern. And that, sounds boring at first, but really allows GoBilda to be very, very scalable and allows us to make a lot of parts that aren't possible in a system like Actobotics. And the big thing that allows us to do that is it being based on a grid pattern. And that just gives us the ability to make stuff like hubs and beams that are very, very versatile and work in tons of applications. So they are all 4 millimeter holes is our standard screw size. So an M4 fastener is kind of the standard in GoBilda. You see there's a 14 millimeter hole that's designed for a 14 mil flanged bearing, 14 millimeter OD. And those are also very common outside of the GoBilda system, which is a big thing we try to focus on overall. Being able to, go grab a bearing, go grab some screws if that's something that you need right in that moment. This is one of the key differences right here. The motion pattern isn't based on a circle pattern like a lot of building systems where you can put the center of the circle, right, say the center of the pattern, and place holes on that. It's actually based on a 16 millimeter grid. So you have that granularity of a part that's going to fit between these two holes. It's also going to fit between these two holes and these two. And it allows a lot of parts to be designed in a way that makes them a lot more versatile. And you'll also see the standard GoBilda pattern has a lot of slots. That slot to 24 allows you to use a lot of those, say, beams and components across. And that's the big thing that kind of pushes us to, at its core, make GoBilda a really flexible build system. Now, the other thing that this page doesn't show you a whole lot of are our product insights. And this is how we give somebody who's just jumping into the system or somebody who doesn't know what a part is or how it's supposed to act, kind of gives us the ability to give you a look inside of our head when we're designing that part and show you a lot of the use cases for it. So motors are a great example of where we have a bunch, and it's kind of an application example saying, hey, these are a bunch of parts you can use together. Here's how they were designed, and here's a little bit more into why we made a part this way. This is a great example of, why are the legs of a clamping mount specifically this long? Well, it's so that the motor, when mounted like this, is going to be an on pattern distance. It's going to be 48 millimeters from the center. So product insights are one of the most valuable things that I think we offer. They really show you a ton about every part, and almost every part, with a few exceptions, have product insights that you can go into, take a look at, and use for your application. If you have a question about something specifically, or if you feel like there's a part that isn't super clear, please let us know. We always love hearing feedback on stuff like that. But gears are also a great example of product insights. The other thing that you'll see on every product page is a step file. If you work in 3D CAD, step files are a great way to get it. So you can click on this, it'll download your zip file, and that gives you the ability to work within 3D CAD like Onshape and other things like that. This is kind of the home page. We'll kind of get into how the site is structured and get into some categories and do some quick overviews. But our home page shows you some featured parts. It also shows whatever the new parts are that we just released. A lot of times there's stuff like spacers, but sometimes you get some cool new stuff that was recently released in there. And then our featured products, which generally we go through and update as things get. So the categories are fairly self-explanatory. We can kind of go from the start here. You've got structure. You can also access these through this hamburger menu if that's more your style. But you've got channel, which I'd say is probably the primary building system for GoBilda. A lot of robots and a lot of chassis and stuff are made out of channel. You've got our standard full channel, which is very similar to the standard style. And you've got low side U channel, which I think is one of the favorite things that I have in the system. It's one of the things that originally swayed me to GoBilda, and it allows you to do a lot of more complex stuff and a lot of more compact assemblies. We've also got Go Rail, which is our slide and lock, T-slot extrusion. Allows you to have stuff that is less pattern based, a little more free form. Beams are a great way to create smaller projects. So square beams are awesome. Flat beams are awesome. I use those all the time. Shafting, you have actually a couple of different options in GoBilda. GoBilda started as 6mm D shafting. It's very standard in FTC, and we support that very well. That's something that we have not only shaft options for, but a bunch of different attachments for that: hubs, gears, couplers, clamping mounts, about everything to support that. The other kind of primary shaft we use in GoBilda is called 8mm Rex. Rex is a rounded hex profile, so it allows you to use round bearings if that's something that's more economical, and it also retains the flats to flat hex profile, so you get a lot of positive drive. You get a really solid hookup with the shaft or the gear or whatever you're using. This is kind of the newer style of shafting. It's going to be more durable and transfer power more easily. Both within FTC loads are just fine, but this is where we're going for a lot of kits and stuff like that. So that's kind of the primary way forward for GoBilda. And we've got that, tubing and a lot of other styles of parts in that category as well. Mounts is a very broad category. There are tons of parts in here. The big one you're going to use most often is going to be this part right here. It ends up being an end cap for U-channel, just like this. We've also got clamping mounts and grid plates and pattern plates and other brackets that are primarily flat. And these are both really great options. They all have their own niche. Base plates you probably aren't going to use much in FTC. And the other thing that we try to support really well, and we've actually got more of these coming down the pipeline, is pattern adapters. So we have adapters for motors as well as general components in Tetrix and Actobotics and AndyMark. We've got some Nexus wheel adapters, Vex, and we've actually got some more Rev adapters on their way too. So that's a big section. We see a lot of teams use this to kind of intermix different build systems and be able to grab a GoBilda hub and use it with your Rev wheel, or add a GoBilda motor to Tetrix channel, stuff like that.
Tony Reynolds just posted in the chat that they absolutely love the Rex over the D shaft.
We hear that from a ton of teams. It's a big upside is that it's really reliable. If you have something like a clamping mount and the pinch bolt on the clamping mount comes loose on a D shaft, in a high load application, that's much more likely to be a point of failure than on a hex shaft where you've got a really strong profile.
Cool. And just a note to everybody on the call: if you have any questions of Ethan or about the GoBilda product, please feel free to type them in the chat. We will do a Q&A after the end of his presentation. So I will now tune out and let Ethan take it over again.
Sounds good. So yeah, this is kind of the primary structure. A lot of times you're going to be looking at channel and beams and mounts, and those are the keystones of that section. We've also got motion, but before we get into that, I'm going to actually skip over to kits. That I think is going to be the place most teams get into GoBilda, is through a kit like this. And we use kits as a way to really support teams because we offer them a lot cheaper than you could buy all those parts individually. Even with your 25% discount, the master kit specifically is kind of a crazy deal. Yeah, it's pretty wild. So this year with the master kit, we wanted to show some examples of how you can use those parts. So we put together kind of an example assembly there of a very simple robot you could go build. And we designed it around giving you a ton of different parts you can use to create a robot. It's not designed to be the end all be all. And chances are you're going to need more or different parts throughout a season to build a robot that you feel like is probably going to be competitive or go win an event. But it gives us a really good opportunity to give you a bunch of parts that you can then use to build stuff and find what you may need more of. So it'll include 4 servos and 4 motors. So it's very well equipped to be a 1 rev hub robot, kind of like this is a good example of kind of a one hub robot where you've got 3 motors, you've got 2 servos. If you are going to go build a full competition robot where you're going to go try to win league beats and stuff, then you're probably going to want more motors. You probably will want more servos. But that's not really what that kit is designed at. The other thing that we see a lot of teams getting into GoBilda with is one of our chassis kits. The Strafer, being our Mecanum chassis, is a lot more popular. And its kind of big selling point is that motors get recessed into the channel. So you get a bunch of center space that you can do about whatever you'd like to with, and you can move these crossbars around wherever you'd like or replace them with something else entirely. But this is kind of our bread and butter chassis. Tons of teams use this, and one of the big things that I was excited about being able to do when I started at GoBilda is kind of take this as a platform and make it really robust and exactly what I felt like FTC as a program needed in a chassis kit. So I'm really excited about this. It was kind of an opportunity for me to spend a bunch of time and obsess on making something as nice as I think it can be. And I think it's a great option for a lot of teams who may not be trying to, find the best performance possible or find the best integration with the rest of their mechanism, but need something that has a ton of mounting options and something that's very flexible. We also have a 6-wheel drive kit. It's called the B-Line. It's a little less popular, but if that's what you're after, then it's a good option, I think. And the last thing we have in this section, besides bundles, which are pretty self-explanatory, are linear motion kits. So we have some, pretty straightforward and simple, not really designed to be the best at any specific game, but linear motion kits that allow you to pretty quickly follow a set of assembly instructions and get something up and running that you can maybe go use a lot of those principles and design your own or use this throughout a season. So this is run on a cable and pulley setup where you've got a spool and it'll extend or retract the lift. And it's got a lot of what we feel like are good design practices in a linear slide, like a tensioning spring and fairly straight cable runs on the return string and stuff like that. So those are great examples. Not if you don't feel like you want to buy one, to take a look at, maybe open up the CAD and see some different ways you can go about powering lifts. That's definitely one of the questions I get most, and it's something that we are hoping to be able to support a little bit better with some more resources next season. We also have our linear actuator kit, which is a lead screw based kit, better at slower stuff.
We got a question out. Should GoBilda bearings be lubricated, and if so, how often?
So we don't specifically recommend it. They will come with some internal grease, and they are closed shielded bearings, so they should hold that fairly well. If you have the same bearing over a few years and it seems to show some sign of wear, then I think it would be worth opening it up and probably adding some lubricant or some grease. But it would take a long time or something, some external factor like getting wet and having that grease leak out to really require that, I think.
Two other questions about the Strafer chassis. Does the kit have enough parts to build a Strafer chassis? And then, more importantly, what is a Strafer chassis?
So a Strafer chassis is our Mecanum chassis. We call it that because it can strafe, it can go left or right. This is a great example of how you can use those wheels to allow an omnidirectional movement. So you've got 4 individual motors, and you can control those by driving them in different directions to either rotate the robot or go in any direction without rotating that robot. So it can be really powerful. I kind of skipped over that part. I totally miffed that. I'm sorry. But it is a really popular because Mecanum wheels are very, very popular in FTC. They've got these 45-degree rollers, and those can spin independently of the wheel as a whole. So it allows you to vector that force in a different direction than the wheel is facing. So the kit, I assume meaning the FTC kit, it does not have enough parts to build the Strafer's chassis specifically. The Strafer has a lot of kind of specialty parts like bevel gears and thrust bearings that make it really great at being what it is, but aren't used a whole lot outside of the strafer chassis specifically. So there are a lot of parts that overlap, motors and channels and mounting or quad blocks and hubs. But there are still a fair number of parts that you have to get separately. It would probably be easier to build something more along the lines of a more traditional chassis setup, where you've got motors and they've got a chain or a belt out to the outside wheels. That I bet you could get a lot quicker out of an FTC kit. Let's see.
Do other motors fit inside your channels?
I believe every FTC motor does. The Ultraplanetary might be cutting it pretty close, but yes, they do.
That's the Reville Ultraplanetary.
I'm trying to think if I know that we designed a mount for it. It's been long enough that I don't remember. Let's see here. Oh yeah, I'll show you where I'm going. So over in the motion section, we've got motors. We've got our motors that we partnered with Modern Robotics to bring teams. We've also got motor mounts for most other FTC legal motors that you can buy. Let's see here. Okay. Yeah. So it looks like all of the FTC legal motors out there will fit inside of GoBilda channel.
Cool. Do you feel like you'll be designing or supplying a telemetry wheel kit or extra add-on to this as either its own thing or an add-on to your strafer kit?
We don't have any plans to do that. That we feel like kind of falls on teams, especially with it being, at least right now, a very high level team endeavor where you've got Omni wheels. There are projects like Open Odo, I think is what it's called.
Right.
That are more open source, designed by teams to give you resources to be able to go out and make that on your own. But we don't have any plans to as GoBilda.
Right. Odometry wheels are for everybody out there, just a way to know where you are on the field at all times. It's a lot of teams are going with that type of navigation.
Yeah, it's been definitely the craze in FTC for a few years now, but
yes,
it's a very high level, like I want to make one of the best autonomouses in the world kind of thing. And
right.
Even for that, I don't think personally is very necessary. But that's kind of a tangent.
Yeah, very good. Do you think that GoBilda or Robot, what did you say, Robot Zone is your parent, will be getting into supplying classroom kits at low costs for, for example, 6 to 10 kit robots to have teachers build robots inside a classroom?
Yeah, I think that's something we have talked to some schools that use. So Servos is our other website that use some smaller scale robots. Like we have a set of runt rovers, and that is something that we'd like to work more on in the future. Stuff like, I think these are a great example.
I'm thinking of marrying the GoBilda chassis or GoBilda kit with the First Tech Challenge classroom pack.
That's not something that we've put a whole lot of time into, but is a good suggestion. I legitimately think we just haven't really put some time into that. So yeah.
Okay, I get royalties.
It looks like Tony asked any thoughts on GoBilda selling sensors. So we have some, I guess right now it's pretty much just limit switches, which you can use in FTC as a digital input. On a limit switch, if you don't know, basically it's just going to be a switch that tells your robot if it's on or off. It's got 3, and we can go, this is kind of also a little bit of a tangent, but you would end up using 2 of these. You're going to use common and NO or NC. And it's a way for your robot to know, say, if the limit switch is triggered on my lift, I need to stop running that lift or it's going to hit an endpoint.
Another question in here about center shaft motors versus off center shaft. they like the fact that the other motors are off center shaft, so they can um, tighten gear belt chains just by rotating.
Sure.
How would GoBilda handle tightening chains or belts with a
So,
center shaft?
yeah. So that is a great question, something that I really should add to my notes. So GoBilda motors all use planetary gearboxes, which is a style of gearbox that does result in a center output shaft. And a big thing, we really love this style of gearbox. It's really robust. And that's something that kind of pushed us to make a build system that works around that really well. So we have chain's a great example. We use an 8 millimeter pitch chain because that allows us to create an exact center distance between two sprockets that are on a hull pattern. So you should be able to, with a chain breaker and a chain and some sprockets, create a no tensioners needed, no idler needed chain setup between any two holes in the GoBilda system. And you'll notice a lot of components that operate outside of channel. A great example is, say, a bearing pillow block. Those are also going to be designed with that 48 millimeter or 24 millimeter pattern in mind. So you can even, go put a pillow block on top of a piece of channel. And because the center to the bottom distance is 24 millimeters, it keeps that increment of the pattern. So you can use, say, a belt or a chain or gears where they'll just line up correctly because you've got the exact right center distance. A good video. I think that would make a lot of sense. That's a great video suggestion. So stuff like gears, you'll notice on every gear page, we should have a product insight that shows how that gear is meant to be used. So for example, a 30-tooth gear is designed to be used with another 30-tooth gear on a 24 millimeter spacing, or it can be used with a 90-tooth gear on a 48 millimeter spacing. So that's all designed around the channel to be able to work with the center output shaft, and kind of gives you a very solid, hey, this is the right spacing for a gear, or this is the right spacing for a chain. We also do have idlers. So instead of rotating your motor, you could go ahead and add an idler into that system. Let's see here. So that it can soak up some extra tension from a belt or a chain. If you want to have a mesh that's a little tighter, then these are a great way to do it. So back before I worked here, when I was first looking at the GoBilda system, one of the big things that sold me was the motion system, and specifically the thing that I loved was Sonic hubs. I still think they're sweet. I think they turned out awesome. Basically, they're kind of our primary method of affixing a motion component to a shaft. And that is, if you've been around FTC for a while, that was a big thing in Servo City. A big thing in Robot Zone as a whole is clamping. Clamping on shafts with Rex bore or with hex bore or with D shafts is something that we really prioritize and we think is really nice. And Sonic hubs are kind of our primary method of doing that, where you can grab a hub, grab your motion component with that pattern on it, and get a super strong connection. We also have hyper hubs, which are going to be a heavier duty, longer version of that. The other nice thing about Sonics compared to kind of a Servo City style classic clamping hub is that they're balanced. So if you're using them on a shooter or something that's really fast, having that component be balanced and not introducing any extra vibrations is really nice, and it can make mechanisms a lot more stable. And if you are using something, like an outside of GoBilda shaft style, we also probably have hubs that are designed for that. So we have 5 millimeter hex bore and 1/2 inch hex bore stuff, as well as a bunch of round bore and servo hubs. We have also been really excited about our servos. They've been used a bunch in FTC, and we kind of have our 3 primary speeds. they are all the same gear or the same motor inside. They're the same controller inside, just with a different gear ratio. So the amount of power is the same. It just depends on if you want to use that power for more torque or more speed. In which case, the torque servo is going to have the most torque, but it'll also be the slowest. So we see a lot of teams use these for a lot of different applications, and we've been really happy with them. And we have mounts and stuff like that. Servo blocks are a big thing that initially made FTC teams really like Actibotics. Is this very strong exoskeleton for a servo to make it so you can abuse it a little bit more. It's got a bearing that supports this shaft and allows you to put a lot of load on a servo, way more than you would ever want to otherwise. And this is something that we've got in Actibotics and Servo City as well. And we've actually got some cool videos showing like just how strong those are, just with a different pattern on the side.
Yeah, servo blocks are the entire reason that there is a longer hardware inspection process for FTC robots from, I would say, about 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah. So those are, all big parts of GoBilda, as well as the rest of the motion system. So we've got gears, sprockets and chain, timing belts and round belts, as well as cable and pulleys. Those are all very standard ways to transfer motion between two different parts or between a servo and a motor. And those all have their own wide selection of parts, so you can go and grab the right belt for your project or grab the right kind of gear for your project and stuff like that. We also looked at hubs. The next thing is bearings are something that we try really hard to support. About all of the motion in GoBilda is designed around ball bearings. It's something that we think is really awesome and helps make robots a little more efficient. Pillow blocks are a aluminum parts that has a bearing enclosed. These are really easy to use when you need to bolt something to a piece of structure, to a part of your robot that needs to have motion. But flanged bearings are used a lot when you're working with channel, because they can drop right in one of those 14 millimeter holes and be really easy to use. So we've got 3 different sizes. We got a bunch more sizes in 14 millimeter OD flanged bearings that you can use for whatever shaft size makes sense. But most of the time in GoBilda, it's 6 millimeter or 8 millimeter Rex.
I saw on your motion page shocks. Where are those?
Those are an oil-filled shock, so they wouldn't be
Okay.
FTC legal.
Okay, just want to make sure that that's known. They're not FTC legal.
Yeah. Let's see. Is there one location for the product insight sheets? There is. So up in the top left, there is a support section. Let's see. So under support, there's a product insights, and this does need some updating. It's a little old, but it's got almost all of the product insights, and you notice it's a pretty big file. This is designed as a searchable PDF, so you can go in there and Control F and search hub and find a ton of things that all show how you can use specific parts. Let's see here.
Do you have bundles of bearings, pillow blocks, servos, etc., that can be more cost efficient?
Yeah, so we do have a section on bundles. That's something I would like to get some more before FTC season. Not sure if that's going to happen totally, but we've got primarily structure bundled, where we have low side channel and full channel and standoffs and spacers and stuff like that. We don't have as much in the way of motion bundles. Just a few, really. So that's something that we'd like to get into more in the future, but isn't something as far as motion and servos and stuff like that we have very many of right now. Okay.
I might have asked this question last year for this conference, Ethan. But I'm going to ask it again. Mm-hmm. Do you anticipate having GoBilda be available on the FTC storefront so that teams can build GoBilda kits or buy GoBilda kits with grant funds.
We would really love for that to be the case. We haven't had any traction from reaching out in the past, but that's something we will kind of continue to reach out and try to make happen. It's
Okay.
not something that we've been able to make happen. We would love it, but yeah.
Yeah, talk to procurement up at first,
Okay. Yeah.
as well as Ken. If you get on Ken's good side,
Yeah, it's been the struggle so far,
I understand.
but thank you for that. Yeah. So yeah, primarily bearings are going to be a really big part. A big thing with bearings and about any kind of motion system is constraining a shaft. So a bearing does a great job of constraining the shaft from moving in kind of your X and Y directions. It's stuck in the bearing, but our bearings and shafts are designed to be more of a slip fit, so they can freely move in and out of a bearing. And that's something that you have to design your mechanism around constraining and keeping those mechanisms in place. There are two primary ways of doing that in GoBilda. One of those being our new series of Rex shaft has an E-clip baked in. So it will go on and provide an end stop for a bearing so that you constrain one end of the shaft. And the other primary option is going to be a collar. A collar you can slide on a shaft, clamp down, and it will be solid on there. So using a collar and a hub or two collars allow you to fully constrain the shaft. So in the example right here, this shaft and none of these components could move anywhere. And an important thing about that is using shims. So shims are something that is pretty critical to about any ball bearing. In a ball bearing, you've got two parts of the bearing that can rotate. You've got the inner race, which will rotate separately from the outer race. So a shim is just a small piece of material. It's a small spacer that is smaller than the outer race, but larger than the inner race, so that whatever you're putting up against the face of that bearing doesn't rub on the outside. It'll just spin freely. Okay. So that's something I think would also be, now that I'm doing this again, I think that would be giving me tons of video ideas. That would be a really great video to be able to show a little bit more clearly. And another component that doesn't get used a whole lot in FTC is couplers. When you need them, they're very, very helpful, but they aren't needed a whole lot. Basically, they act as a way to join two shafts together. If you need a really long output on your motor, they're a great option there. So they essentially have two sets of clamping style of constrainment methods, and you can join two shafts together. We've got a few different styles. Primarily, you're going to be using hyper clamping or servo couplers. Flexible stuff is more for 3D printers and parts like that. More CNC applications. Yeah. The other thing to keep in mind when you're using bearings specifically is that you want to make sure you have 2 points of support on any shaft. So generally that's going to be 2 bearings, but it could also be, 2 different, the primary thing is going to be 2 bearings. Having more can sometimes be helpful, but most of the time people say exactly 2 is the best option, because that allows the shaft to spin as freely as possible. You kind of minimize the chance for some small misalignment, making a big deal in a part. So I think you'll probably end up noticing that in a lot of our more fully featured product insights, you'll almost always see 2 bearings on everything, just to give the full amount of support for a part. The section we haven't really touched on that much is electronics, and that's because there isn't a whole lot that's very applicable to FTC. So we have a servo programmer that allows you to flip our servos from standard 100 or 300 degree rotation mode to continuous mode. It acts more like a motor. But most of the stuff isn't going to be FTC legal. We do resell an FTC legal battery. It is the modern robotics battery, this one right here. And we have chargers that support that pretty well. But that's about the extent of this section. We've got wiring that is designed to be primarily adapters if you want to use, say, the bullet connectors on a GoBilda motor. Then you probably would want a GoBilda or a bullet to JSTVH to plug into an expansion hub. So this is the section where you're going to find a lot of that. A lot of it isn't targeted for FTC, but is something that you probably will end up using. And we talked about it a little earlier, but switches are about the other FTC legal side of that section. And then over in hardware, this is where you'll find screws. GoBilda is all designed around M4, so that's what we're going to sell. And stuff like washers and shims and nuts. We really love using socket head screws. They are a larger hex style. They're a 3mm hex driver. So if you can fit them, they're going to be the best option. And we really like lock nuts. They have if you haven't used them before, they've got a slice of nylon. So as you run that screw through, it deforms the nylon and creates a really strong hole on a screw so it won't back out due to vibration and stuff like that.
Question about motor. Can you on the shafts on motors? Can you switch out the axles on the motors if you want a longer shaft without needing a coupler?
So you can switch out the shafts on motors primarily as a replacement option. If you bend or really misuse a motor shaft, it happens especially on this series of motor. We do have replacements for those. I don't think we have them separately on the site right now, but we can definitely send them out to you if you give us a call. We don't have different length replacement output shafts. This output shaft is a pretty specific shape. Let's see here if we still have a photo of those up. So those basically act as not only a shaft, but they are also carrying a gear back inside the gearbox. So they're a very specific part, and we don't have those in multiple lengths right now. We do have a longer output series of gear motors, though. So that's something you do need. That is something we kind of have catered towards a little bit with the 5204 series of gear motor. One of the things that I'm most excited about that we've recently started to carry we have a new series of tools. We've started to carry Wera tools. So we've moved over to all of our hex keys and stuff are really nice name brand stuff, which has helped a ton with a lot of stripped screws. A lot of times when we're using them, at least stripped screws end up being half your screw is stripped and half your driver is stripped. So we've been really happy with that. And all of the kits and stuff that you buy through GoBilda are going to come with these, as well as if you need additional for other brands, or if you just need more tools. Wera is pretty expensive, but they're a really, really good option if you need, 3 hex keys for your robot or 3 T-handle drivers. There's something I'm really excited about. The primary tools you would need for a GoBilda robot are going to be a 3mm hex key and a 2.5mm hex key, as well as a 7mm a 7mm wrench. So combination wrench or this guy right here are both really nice options, as well as some other parts like 4mm and 3.3mm drill bits and taps are really handy when you start to make your own more custom parts.
Our recommendation, both for probably, I don't think it's for you, Ethan, but also for the teams, is to put different colored tape on the edges of the hex key, so you know you're looking for a color rather than a size. In other words, you don't need to grab 5 hex keys if you're looking for just that one specific one.
Yes,
You know,
that's
to grab
a
the red
great
one.
option. Yeah, that's something we had the option to do. It was going to add like $5 to each key somehow, where I had some colored tools, and they were all expensive. So we went with this style. You can add some tape if you like. I don't know if we showed it in the render, but there is some text that is lasered on at the side of these. It's really small. Doesn't really help you nearly as much as tape would, but they'll
Right.
let you at least see what size it is when you go to add some kind of marking. Does Wera make a T-handled hex? They do, and I think you'll probably see them. We're going to start selling them here like really soon. We just got some more website stuff to do, but they've got a nice T-handle. I've been using it for like a year, and they're really nice. So I bet like in the next few weeks we'll have that online. That should show up in new products too.
Okay. What parts do you recommend for this year's game? Being in water. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So that's a tough one.
Water
But
game.
yeah.
Never mind, people.
Yeah, that's an old joke.
Yes. I am old.
Oof. Yeah, I don't think a lot of our components. That's the downside of ball bearings. They aren't great in water. Yeah. If you guys have any last minute questions, I think we're pretty close to wrapping up here.
Yep.
If you have any questions that you think of after the presentation, or you just want to call and chat about FTC stuff, you can give us a call.
What's your email address, Ethan?
tech@gobilda.com will be more general, and ethan@gobilda.com will reach me specifically. I can throw those into the chat, then you can
Too
get
late.
that. So those are great ways to reach me. You can feel free to shoot me an email, and I'm happy to help with about whatever. This is really what I love to do. This has basically been my whole life for the past 2 years. So feel free to give us a call. Oh yeah. So I forgot to plug GoBilda TV. That is really sad. We have a GoBilda.tv, a Twitch stream that we're going to start up here pretty soon. We have done it bi-weekly and weekly, where we basically go over new parts and go over some cool builds, examples, and stuff like that. And all of those past streams that we've done also exist on our YouTube channel. They should be in the playlist. But we go over some non-FTC projects sometimes, and we also go over new parts. And this is also where you'll find our more long-form standard YouTube videos. So, yeah.
Cool. Question: when buying tools, do we want to go all metric?
It will depend a little bit on what parts you end up using. With GoBilda, yes, you can very comfortably be all metric. If you are using some other build systems have some Imperial mixed in there, but with GoBilda specifically, yes, I'd say all metric is a great option.
Right. If you're still using Tetrix,
Mhm.
that uses Imperial.
Yep.
Question from a coach about the Strafer kit. Do they need to sign up every month in order to be considered for each month?
Nope.
Or once you sign up, you're good for the whole tournament?
Yep. Once you sign up, it'll go through, and we'll just pick teams out every month. That allows us. The big reason we did that is to allow, say, rookie teams who just register later in the season to still have that opportunity, as well as get teams who are older and know about it the chance to get a kit hopefully before kickoff. That's a big promise, but very shortly after or before kickoff for that first round.
Right.
Well, let's see here.
And you're sponsoring some live kickoffs again?
We are. So there should be I don't know the exact number, but I know that it keeps increasing. There are a bunch of kickoffs. I'm pretty sure, if we haven't already, I think we will very soon reach out to Becca over there to hopefully get some Iowa kickoffs sponsored. And there we have a bunch of parts.
That's on my to-do list.
Sweet. That sounds great.
I think I got the email blast from GoBilda. I think I filled out for Mississippi.
Yep, we got you. I think you were one of the first. let's see.
Fantastic. Well, I think we are about at the end of time. Ethan, do you have any last final words?
Oof. I don't really think I do. Have
Okay.
fun this season.
Yeah.
It should be really, really exciting. I'm really hopeful that it turns out really well. So I'm excited to see what you guys do. Hopefully I'm going to be at more Iowa events this year.
I hope so too. And they're going to be in person.
Yes, that is
All right.
exciting.
I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.